Well, hello, it's me, Cheryl, and I know you care about your relationship because you're listening to the Sex, Love, and Elephants podcast and the Is Love Dead series. So here's what I want you to do. Listening is great, my loves, but I want you to take action. In May and again in September, I'm going to be teaching an exclusive free 3-hour Zoom workshop for you and your partner. So click below, get on the wait list, and that way you'll be sure to get the Zoom link and the workbook. We're going to work on the 3 keys to passion, my signature teaching. What's going well and what's not going well in your connection and communication, in your fun, the thrill, the dating, and in or out of the bedroom. Make sure you join the wait list. And if you want to rate yourself right now on how you're doing on those 3 key areas of relationship, take my passion quiz. It takes under 10 minutes and it will show you where you're strong, where you're weak, and what you should start doing about it. Can't wait to work with you. I'll see you soon.
Breaking news. Is long-term love dead? Divorce, affairs, boredom, and no passion. Couples are losing hope.
My husband never romances me anymore. I'm so lonely.
We used to have a great sex life. Now she always says she's too tired.
Experts state 30 to 40% of couples never make love. Only 9% say they are still excited about their partner, and 90% say they have ugly arguments.
I want to fix us, but I don't know how.
I lay in bed at night thinking, is this it?
This just in. Dr. Cheryl Fraser says passion can last a lifetime. It just needs a little help.
Hi, I'm Dr. Cheryl, and it's true that it sure looks like long-term love is dead, but I'm here in this special podcast series to help you bring your dying relationship back to life. Let's get going right now. Dr. Cheryl, I hate to admit it, but I have no sexual desire toward my partner. Help. Is it true that long-term sexual passion is impossible? Hi, welcome to Sex, Love, and Elephants, and to this episode of our theme we're developing in my new series here, which I am calling Is Long-Term Love Dead? ? And this episode and the next episode and some upcoming episodes are really about is long-term sex dead. So let me, to give a context for all of this, take us all way back to Cheryl. That's me when I was approximately 11 or 12 years old. And I discovered orgasms, and I had a sex toy. My first sex toy was my Snoopy electric toothbrush. Not a word of a lie. I discovered vibratory joy on the clitoris very, very early. And it was actually a beautiful, healthy, powerful, positive sexual exploration. I want you right now, as I'm talking about this, to think back to your own discovery in your own body, in your own mind, in your own heart of sexual pleasure or erotic pleasure. Now, of course, this is a very fraught topic for a lot of us. We may have, as it happened, one of my patients was talking with horror about something that had happened to, not that kind of horror, to her 3-year-old daughter, which is her 3-year-old daughter was watching cartoons and sitting in the living room, kind of lounging in her beanbag chair, and was kind of gently rubbing her hand over her underwear around her vulva area. And my patient was in the kitchen island, could see her little daughter, and her mother was visiting. So grandma was visiting, and grandma walked into the room and saw the little girl kind of gradually just rubbing her own vulva area. Her clitoris wouldn't be developed yet. It wasn't fully masturbation, but it might have felt just a little bit nice. And grandma walked in, and the way my patient tells it, she's like, she imagined herself in slow motion horror movie, like diving across the island between the kitchen and the living room to stop her mother, the grandmother, saying anything, but she couldn't get there in time. And grandma walked in and saw the little girl just innocently rubbing around her vulva area and said, "Don't touch yourself there. That's dirty." That's all it can take. That's all it can take to have us, male or female, gay, straight, LGBTQ plus, rainbow, everyone, love you, however you love, whoever you love, you are my people. Whatever you identify with, whatever you identified with then. If you were touching yourself in the genital region, through your clothes or not through your clothes, what messaging did you get if anybody knew about it? What messaging did you give yourself I gave myself eventually negative messaging around this gorgeous, beautiful, secret, private, delightful thing Snoopy and I figured out. Hey, they say a dog is a man's best friend. Snoopy was a girl's best friend. So I had this beautiful relationship with sensual and erotic pleasure. I would have these beautiful orgasms, didn't really know what they were. I kind of had a sense they were private and not something anybody needed to know about. But as I grew, pretty healthy family, reasonably healthy culture, I ended up absorbing like a sponge, as most of us did. This is 50 years ago or a little bit less. And for some of you, you're younger, some of you, you're older. But I absorbed some guilt and shame without any overt messaging that I remember of touching myself there. What does that have to do with is long-term love and sex dead? A lot, because I'm going to take you, and we've just begun on a journey through Dr. Cheryl Fraser's own sexual responsivity and how it changed radically in my early 50s. So forward from there, I really do have, and I'm very blessed and I feel very grateful for it, a beautiful coming of age story in terms of my own sexuality. So I had this healthy, beautiful masturbation life. And when I began to get interested, in my case at that time, in boys, I have these great erotic fantasies. I think I spoke about Sean Cassidy in the intro episode to this is Long-Term Love and Sex Dead series. And I talked about how I was madly and passionately in love with Sean Cassidy, the pop idol, the star of TV's Hardy Boys at the time in the early 70s. And I would have these erotic fantasies about him. So I had a really healthy, beautiful, and easily orgasmic relationship with my body. And so when I began dating and kissing and making out, I also had a strong inner feeling. It was just important to me that if and when I shared my sexuality with, in this case, a boy or a man, it would be at my choice, and I wanted it to be with someone I loved. So I had this wonderful boyfriend. We'll call him E. And he was 21 and I was 16 when we met. I was in grade 12. I was pretty mature, 16, skipped a couple grades, etc. And we fell in love, and he was just, and remains a wonderful young man, and now a wonderful, not so young man. And we had a beautiful love affair, and he was sexually experienced, not particularly. He'd had two partners for a year or so each. He wasn't a sleep around kind of guy, although that would have been fine too. I'm just giving you the context. So he'd been sexually active. I had been very sexually active with myself and Snoopy, but not had any intercourse or at that point had any genital touching of my own genitals. So we had this beautiful, slow, erotic lead up to me eventually choosing to lose my virginity with him. And I have one of the only healthy, sexually satisfying losing the virginity stories of any woman I've ever spoken to. And I've probably heard the losing virginity stories of thousands of women at this point. Mostly they don't come. Mostly there's not much pleasure. Mostly it's awkward as hell. But what I did with E, we would lie on the couch in my parents' rec room when they were asleep, and we would make out for 2 hours, and we would kiss, and we would neck, and we would lick, and we would nibble, and kind of nothing below the collarbone by my choice. And he was incredibly respectful of what I wanted. Wow, what self-control he had looking back. And eventually we'd get to where he would play with my breasts and eventually slide his hands into my underwear, which still is a big turn on. And he would give me orgasms with his fingers. But he never pushed or insisted or moved me towards his penis until I was ready. So it was this beautiful sexual opening together. And when we eventually got, after a few months, I went on the pill before we had intercourse sex for the first time. That's how mature I was in my choices. So I was probably just 17. And when we eventually had intercourse sex, the intercourse was a tiny bit uncomfortable when his penis was in for the first time, but it was gorgeous. And of course, he gave me a roaring orgasm with his mouth afterward, because at that point, he'd been going down on me for a couple of months. The moral of the story is this: I had a pretty healthy relationship with sexual pleasure, a pretty healthy relationship around my own sense of my own boundaries, that I wanted to share my body and my eroticism with someone I loved. And then I pretty much had serial monogamy relationships through my life since then. The occasional casual encounter, which I have no problem with and no theoretical or moral or religious or psychological objection to. But for me, I like meaning with my sex. So most of the people I've made love with in my life were people I cared about or loved. Or the occasional more casual thing, someone I liked on a vacation when I was traveling and I was single, etc. Those were never as satisfying sexually, though, even if there was a bit of spark of thrill and novelty. You know why? Because great sex needs to know each other's body for the most part. So there's some backstory. Now through my 20s, 30s, 40s, and up until my early 50s, I had a strong, high, beautiful, delightful sex drive. I usually had a slightly higher sex drive than my male partners, meaning if they'd be, happy to make love maybe twice a week, I'd be kind of itchy to make love maybe 3 or 4 times a week. I probably initiated sex a little more often than my male partners in almost all my relationships except one. And my orgasms were easy and strong and delicious and fabulous. Really strong, beautiful orgasms. Thank you, Snoopy. Thank you, beautiful, long, slow introduction to sexuality. Thank you to my own interest and knowledge in sexuality and learning my body and sharing that with people that I wanted to share it with. So fast forward around 52 years old, I'm 60 now. I like the average for Canadian women is menopause is usually around the age of 52. In that context, menopause is defined as 12 consecutive months without a period. I happened right about on schedule. To my shock and big surprise, again, I'd had a high, healthy, above average ease, delight, and interrelationship with my sexuality from the age of 12 to 52. That's 40 gorgeous years. The changes of menopause made some radical adjustments to the sexuality in this body I had experienced my whole life until then. First one was my sex drive, my sexual desire, my easy turn on, my interest in making love and being sexual with myself in masturbation or my partner took a deep dive. It went from above average to almost non-existent over about a year. And that really took me by surprise. I'm well aware of the hormonal changes, of the body image changes, of the relational changes, of the cultural belief that thrill doesn't last forever and all that bullshit. I'm aware that for a lot of us in a female body and a lot of you in a male body, that the sexual desire, the horniness, the turn on, the interest in sex really can change through menopause or andropause. I did not expect it to happen to me, not because I'm extra special because of my training. That actually has nothing to do with it, but because I'd had such a gorgeous, rich, erotic, deep, fantastic relationship with my sexual turn on and my orgasms and enjoyed that my whole life. So here I am, 52, 53, 54, saying, what the F happened? I could go a month or two without feeling turned on and wanting to have sex. Before, within a few days or a week, I'd be a little itchy, like, hey, babe, or myself, I'd masturbate in a really healthy, beautiful way. It wasn't addictive. It wasn't compulsive. It was just strong and a healthy and a beautiful part of being alive. Because the word libido, which we often think of as sex drive or horniness, actually derives from a Latin word and it means life force. I had a gorgeous, happy relationship with the life force of my eroticism, or as I teach in my 12-week program, only offering it once this year at 2025. And it may be the very last time actually that I will teach it myself. This October, 2025, early October, we're going to debut and open the doors probably for the last time. So if you're interested in possibly spending 3 months with me in a deep dive to all 3 sides of your passion triangle, click below where you're listening or go to my website, drcherylfraser.com, and sign up for the wait list. All that means is you'll be the first to know when we open the doors, and you'll also be the first to be invited to the free workshops I'll be giving in May and in September before we kick off the big program in October. So, what was I talking about? I was talking about the big change in my sex drive and the big change in my sexuality and what I needed to then do about it. My sexual response to being turned on, to being horny, had radically decreased. And the other really disappointing thing is the quality of my orgasms. If you think somewhat arbitrarily, but you think about the pleasure level, the quality, the intensity, the baba boom of any given orgasm, I would say out of a scale of 0 being no pleasure at all, 10 being rapturous, incredibly, really strong pleasure, my orgasms were usually about an 8 or a 9 or a 10 out of 10. After menopause, maybe a 2 out of 10. So this beautifully responsive body, this sexually liberal and fairly open and fairly comfortable with sexuality mind ended up in a body that wasn't interested anymore and ended up in a clitoris and a vulva that responded, yes, I could still come most of the time, but that the strength and pleasure level and depth and breadth of that orgasm was like a 2 out of a 10. So I want to reassure all of you listening about a number of things that these next few episodes really focusing on is long-term sex debt. are focusing on, which is it's very normal for males and females to have a fairly radical drop in their sexual interest and their sexual desire and their orgasmic response in your 40s or 50s or 60s. It can happen earlier as well. It's very common even for men. Don't believe the old tropes and the bullshit stories about how men always want to stick their dick in something. The fairly significant decrease in sexual desire for men in their 40s, 50s, and 60s is very apparent. Also, the lack of interest in making love. So the lack of sex drive, just not very interested. The quality of the male orgasm can go very similar to what I've just described, where your ejaculation orgasms used to be strong and intense and powerful, and now they're quite weak. Not necessarily the cum itself. The ejaculate may still be strong. Yes, I'm using explicit language. This is important that we not leave you puzzled about what I'm referring to. Part of good sex therapy is to make sure that you understand what I'm talking about. So you might still ejaculate fine with a reasonable amount of fluid coming out, of ejaculate coming out, but the experience of the pleasure and the intensity and the spasms of that orgasm to ejaculation may be much lower, similar to what I've described here for me. Might have been a 9 or a 10 or an 8 or a 7 out of intensity for much of your life. And now it's like a 2 or a 3, not to mention changes in the penis's ability to be hard, the strength of your erection. You may be hard enough to penetrate, in this case, for the moment, vaginal intercourse, of course, anal intercourse, oral intercourse, anything you want to play with is A-okay by me. Be consensual and have a great time. But let's say vaginal intercourse, you may find that your penis, if you're a penis-owning person, is strong and firm enough to penetrate and to have thrusting and to have vaginal intercourse, but that you lose your erection partway through. Or you find yourself rushing quickly towards climax because you're afraid you'll lose your erection, and etc. These are real life, my loves. Some of you might be listening and be more in your 20s, 30s, and 40s, and you might be, oh my God, that sounds awful. Well, a lot of things about aging aren't things we would choose. We wouldn't choose the achy knees. We wouldn't choose the wrinkles. We wouldn't choose that interesting roll of chub around the belly, despite eating well and exercising like a demon that seems hard to get rid of. And we wouldn't choose to have our sexual desire wane and our sexual pleasure wane and our sexual responsivity wane. But for the majority of us, no matter how healthy and beautiful your sexual life has been, the way mine has been, you will likely experience some real changes. Now, let's also call out an elephant in the room, not the good kind of elephant. This can happen when you're 20 or 30 or 40. The radical decrease in sexual interest after the birth of your first child for either of you, either parent or gay or straight or trans parents, whoever you are, moving into what I call, as you've heard on this podcast before, marriage incorporated, where you're trundling along, doing well with the kids, raising your kids, paying the mortgage, going to work, going to camping or to Hawaii for vacation. But there's very little eroticism. There's very little fun and spice, very little thrill and sensuality, two sides of the passion triangle in your relationship. And you're in that we're friends, not lovers. We are roommates. We're not spicy anymore. We miss it. Is long-term sex dead? Well, honestly, based on research, it's in a lot of trouble. I'm going to give you a statistic here you've heard before on this podcast, and I hope you've heard it elsewhere, but it sure as hell isn't being talked about, which is about 30 to 40% of couples in a longer term relationship, say more than 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years, not necessarily decades. How long? More than 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 years, not necessarily 10, 20, or 30 years. Report for at least one person a real low sexual desire. 30 to 40% of couples are not making love at all. 30 to 40% of couples in a committed relationship are not making love at all in a committed long-term relationship, particularly if you're older than, this isn't entirely accurate. The research isn't there to make this a clear statement that is backed up by fact enough yet. But if you're older than 35 or 40 years old and you've been together more than a few years, chances are your sexuality has taken a deep dive. I'll tell you some of those reasons in a moment. But if you Google this and you do some decent Google research and you pull up some accurate, it seems, studies on something like how often does the average couple have sex, you're going to get told once a week or twice a week. Balderdash. The average couple absolutely does not make love once or twice a week. I wish they did. The problem with the research is a lot of that research is kind of cross-generational. So they might survey 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 people aged 20 to 50 or 60, because the bias is that people in their 60s and 70s aren't having sex. Bullshit on that. We're going to change that myth. And I'm going to help you change that over these next few episodes and potentially move from sex less to sexual. But anyway, you'll pull up a study and it will say the average North American, let's say, makes love in a committed relationship, makes love or has sex once or twice a week. It's so not true. It's more like 30 to 40% of couples who are in a long-term relationship aren't making love at all, or they're in what is defined as a clinically sexless relationship. Here's one good definition of that. They vary, but the definition here would be you make love 6 or fewer times a year. So if you think about that, it means you make love about once every 2 months. Hubby and I too, we used to make love twice a day when we were dating, and I was 49 and he was 48. We weren't spring chickens. And then for the first year or two, we'd make love 3 or 4, maybe 5 times a week. It was gorgeous. It was beautiful. Our turn on was super fantastic. We were excited and we knew what we wanted and we loved to share our sexuality. Then in the last few years, through a number of factors, menopause, changes in both of our sex drives. I'm 60, he's 59. We're in good health, nothing particular dramatic, but we could go easily a month, 6 weeks without making love. That was not who we used to be. That is not who our bodies used to be. It's not what our turn on and our mind used to be. So it was really sad for us. Because I'm pretty good at what I do, we then, what do you know, started practicing what I preach, which is the importance of scheduling sex. I'm going to do a whole episode on that in the next couple of episodes, so stay tuned. But very briefly, if 30 to 40% of us are not making love at all or every month or two, and we'd like to change that, here's the problem. If you rely on what is called spontaneous desire, you're in trouble. There's a second type of sexual desire called responsive desire, and that's the one you need to work on. Now, don't worry, I'm going to give you an overview in this episode of spontaneous desire and responsive desire. Then in the next episode, I'm going to teach you the 2 keys to your erotic engine and the importance of scheduling sex. And then in the episode after that, one of the upcoming ones, I'm going to tell you in detail how my husband and I work with these concepts to reinvigorate and revive our own sexual life. But for now, bring it back. I just mentioned there are 2 types of sexual desire. The first one's called spontaneous desire, and the second one is called responsive desire. Well, Cheryl, what's the diff? We're aching to know. Spontaneous desire is as the name implies. So spontaneous desire is you feel quite easily, without a lot of external or internal stimulation, you feel quite easily turned on. You can quite spontaneously feel horny. You can quite spontaneously feel like making love. You can quite spontaneously want to approach your partner for sexual contact. That was very much my sweetheart and I in the first few years of our relationship. We've been together going on 12 years now. And we would make love once that day. And for the first 2 years of our relationship, he lived about an hour away. His career was there. Mine was here. And we didn't live together, but we'd spend 3 or 4 days or nights a week together and made a real point to do that because the thrill was high and we were making the effort, right? So let's say he'd spent a night and a day with me and we'd made love that morning. And now he needed to leave at 10 at night. And I was kissing him goodbye at the door when you used to make sure you did that because your thrill was high. I'd like us all to begin that again. And I'd kiss him goodbye at the door and it would turn into a sexy tongue French kiss and our tongues would touch. Boom, I'd be wet. Boom, I'd be turned on. Boom, I would want to make love to this hunk of burning love. And generally we'd head to the bedroom or the couch or whatever and we'd have a nice quickie and then he'd go home. We'd already made love that day. That's spontaneous desire. And it doesn't need to be as perhaps dramatic sounding as we made love this morning and we're by then, I don't know, 49 years old and we kiss goodnight and boom, we're horny again. But that was our reality for a while. A maybe more typical spontaneous desire expression or description or example would be you're hanging out doing your day and your partner's hanging out doing their day and you just kind of feel a little bit turned on in your body. That's one of the 2 keys to the erotic engine I'll talk about next episode. Or you feel a little frisky in your mind. You're like, oh, it'd be kind of nice to go kiss my sweetheart right now, or kind of nice to go, rub them through their jeans while they're making dinner. It'd be kind of nice to invite them into the shower. It was fairly easy to feel turned on. You could think about the possibility of getting sexual or erotic with your partner, and the body would quickly follow. Or you could be frying eggs and your body could feel a little frisky, a little bit of a turn on. And then you might go, I might like to go find my partner. That's spontaneous desire. And it's beautiful. It's wonderful. It's one of the most lovely aspects of being alive, is to have that spontaneous feeling of libido, that spontaneous feeling of turn on. However, for almost all people, there's some exceptions, and that's beautiful and great. I love exceptions. We're all very different. But for the majority of people, regardless of your gender identification, what genitalia you're currently rocking, or anything else, spontaneous desire wanes after the first 18 or 24 months together. That's not always true. My spontaneous desire was strong right for 40 years. We're all different. It's not that common that in a couple, you'll both have pretty strong spontaneous desire for 40 years, but I very much hope you do. I hope you have it for 80 years. I hope you have it till you die. But when we rely on spontaneous desire, our sex life is in trouble. Write that down. When we rely on spontaneous desire, our sex life is in trouble. To quote some of my friends, world experts in this as well, Dr. Rosemary Basson from the University of British Columbia Sexual Health and Medicine Clinic uses the phrase when she talks about responsive desire, the majority of long-term couples start making love from a place of sexual neutrality. Well, what does that mean? The majority of long-term couples start making love from a place of sexual neutrality means we start making love when neither of us is turned on at all. What? Well, that seems a little odd. Why would we start to have sex when neither of us is in the mood? Hold that thought. That's the second type of desire, responsive desire. Here's another quote from Esther Perel, one of the greats in the field. Married sex is scheduled sex. What does that mean? Same diff. It means if you're waiting around for that easy, lusty turn on of spontaneous desire, you might be waiting a long time. You need to learn to schedule sex. We're going to say more about that in the next few episodes in this series of Is Long-Term Sex Dead? Weeping face, but then hopeful emoji face. Let me review. There are two types of sexual desire. The spontaneous kind is the one that tends to wane for any number of factors, including worrying about your finances, having a sick kid or a kid you're trying to help not fail math, needing to leave and go to another province or state and nurse one of your parents who's taken a fall and are not doing well because you're a sandwich generation. So many things get in the way of our turn on. So many things get in the way of our spontaneous desire that if you're not rocking responsive desire, your sex life is in trouble and you're likely going to end up, or you're already firmly in, the 30 to 40% of couples who are not making love at all, or very, very rarely. Now, let me reassure you, the research on this sucks. If you Google it, you'll get discouraged, like I said, because it'll say couples are boinking twice a week. They're not. They're simply not. Some are, and that's wonderful. You're normal if one or both of you has low or non-existent sex drive. You're normal if one or both of you has a masturbation life, but you're not making love with each other. You're normal if you're good with that because you're not feeling the urge. So why would you bother? You are normal if you fall into the low sex or sexless quality of long-term relationship. And those of you who are making love, let me challenge you. How creative is it? How fun is it? How spicy is it? Or do you do what I call nipple, nipple, crotch, good night, which is not a bad thing? As it implies, that means we've got our routine. I touch you here, you touch me there. We have our exact routine. Ideally, one or both of us has an orgasm. It's really nice. It probably lasts about 7 minutes. That's the average length of a sexual encounter from, hey, do you wanna, to falling asleep. Is that bad? It's not bad at all. But if you are making love and you're like most of us, lazy about it, because there's not a lot of spontaneous desire. There's enough to get you into bed and naked, but it's like you kind of do this routine and it's kind of good and it's satisfying and it's nice and yahoo. You can do better. You can work harder to have a richer, more profound, and more satisfying sexual life. So whether you're sexless, and like many of the couples who've taken the Become Passion program, my 3-month immersion program where I coach you, they start out, we haven't made love in 7 years. We haven't made love in 20 years. Or like Norm and Cheryl, one of the testimonials you can go watch below where you're listening to this. There'll be a link to our testimonials page. They hadn't made love since their 40s and they were in their early 70s. They changed separately from each other for 30 years in the walk-in closet, from their day clothes to their bed night clothes. They hadn't seen each other naked in 30 years. They now schedule a sensual date every 6 days because they took the program and they did the work and they learned how to communicate better, how to stop fighting ugly, how to be more communicative. As you heard in some of the earlier episodes in this series, including the one I did with my friend Bruce, you've got to connect and be kind and all the things I teach before you can have a good sex life. So let's again just pull some of this together. Long-term sex is almost dead. 30 to 40% of you aren't having sex at all. And one of you at least is completely fine with that because you have no desire. That is this body now. Dr. Cheryl Fraser's body is that way as well. And my hubby's body pretty much as well. We're both like, what the hell happened here? If you rely on spontaneous desire, it's a bit like relying on your teenager to spontaneously want to clean their room from top to bottom. It's extremely unlikely to happen. If it does happen, enjoy the hell out of it, but don't rely on it. What you need to do is develop responsive desire, which is where you get turned on in response to something. In response to what is the obvious, big, important question now. You become turned on in response to deciding you'll have a shower together, in response to playing a flirty truth or dare card game with each other and sharing a fantasy and getting turned on that way, in response to it's Tuesday and we've made a commitment that every Tuesday at 8 p.m. we spend an hour naked in bed together playing around. You need to design a sex life that works for you. To quote Esther again, married sex is scheduled sex. We can obviously substitute the word married there. Long-term relationship sex is scheduled sex. So here's what's going to happen next in this podcast series. This whole podcast for all of these months is on Is Long-Term Love Dead? No, it's not, but it's in trouble, and here's what to do about it. Is long-term sex dead? No, it's not, but it's in trouble, and here's what to do about it. And is long-term thrill dead? Excitement, passion, all the things that lead some people, too many people, into an affair, because that hurts you and the person you've betrayed and the person you've betrayed with. It's not a happy situation for anybody. It hurts. This series is to wake you up, smarten you up, give you a call to action and say it is possible to change these issues. It is possible to learn how to be more happy within your relationship. It is possible to learn how to be more connected, to have more fun. It is possible, as I often say, to fall back in love again over and over with the one you're already with. It takes intentionality. It takes killing the soulmate. It takes making your love life a hobby. And that's what we're on about in this podcast. That's what I'm especially on about in my 3-month program. Did I mention 2025 October? The doors will open. We'll kick off mid-October. And this is the last time I'm planning to teach it with me coaching live. So it's going to be a very special group, limited to 100 couples at the most. Get on the wait list and you'll be the first to hear about that, and also to be invited to my free workshops that I'll be teaching in May and in September. And then you'll get a real sense of working with me and see if that long-term program, the 3-monther, is right for you. And so what happens in the next episode? In the next episode, I'm going to continue directly where I'm leaving off today. I'm going to review spontaneous versus responsive desire, and I'm going to teach you the 2 keys to your erotic engine. The 2 keys to turning yourself on even when you're super not in the mood. Which brings us to this episode's Love Bite. If you wait around to be turned on, it can be a long and lonely wait. Long-term, passionate, enjoyable, delightful sex is possible, but it needs a little help. Thanks so much for being here. I'll be with you in our next episode in 14 days. Can't wait to continue this conversation.